Okay, welcome to week 6 of Introduction to Corrections, J115. We are at the point now where we've covered uh, two portions of your project, week 2 and week 4. You should have received the grades by then and my comments about them. The next one that's coming up is coming up in week 7, which there is no lecture, but I'm going to go over that nevertheless before I adjourn today to make sure that you're prepared for that. So without any further ado, I'm going to get right into the assignments for this week. And let me share my screen. And here it is. Okay. So you can see down here that, well, let's see. You can see that we have 2 more lectures to go after this, week 8 and week 10. I also have links to the open house, which some people still are asking about the questions for week 7 interview. They are located in the week 1 module. I covered it in detail in the open house. So those of you who asked that question, I direct you back to the open house. Go and look at it, and you will understand the questions. But they're located under the Lessons tab in week 1, and it tells you what the requirements are for that. Then week 2 lecture, and then week 4, and so now we're at week 6. Let's go over the announcement for today. The prison experience, male versus female, there's some differences that take place there. You will read section 6, 8, and 11. I provided you the PowerPoints for you to use for your studying and for your information to help you. And we're going to go over a little bit about the classification myth versus fact and some thoughts from a prison lieutenant when we conclude. Well, before we conclude, we'll go over that. Discussion post due last night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, issues unique to female inmates, and your reply post due Saturday. Finally, your written assignment, 3 issues in male prison today, that's 1, and Stanford prison experience. Those are both APA required, citations in the body and references at the end, along with a cover sheet. Roman 12 point should be your type, and that is due this Sunday. Okay, so now let's go to the course calendar. Course calendar here. And it tells you your reading assignment, it tells your initial post about the live lectures taking place right now, your reply post due Saturday, and then your 2 written assignments are due Sunday. And then next week, when there's no lecture, you have reading, initial post, reply post, and then your written assignment, and then your course project. That's for week 7. We're going to talk about that in detail in a little bit. So now let's go right to our module 6. Again, the assignments. Remember, the key to getting assignments right is to follow the rubric. The rubric tells you almost the same information here, and it tells you what you need to do. Okay? So Make sure you have the right amount of pages. And when it's due, it tells you again. So here's the rubric. A 2-page, 2 pages. And then it tells you what you need to have in there. Okay? A minimum 2-page requirement. Should be citations in the body, APA format with a page, reference page, spacing, and paragraph indents. In-text citations as well. Okay? So then we go back and we look at the next assignment, which is the Stanford prison experience. It's based on a video, and you have the link to that video that you can look at. Again, the rubric tells you it's a 1-page paper. So you have a 2-page paper for the first assignment and a 1-page for this one, and answer these questions and also provide the citations as well in the body and references at the end. All right, so that should be it. Let's see. Whoops. See what happened here. I'm trying to get back. Here we come. There we go. Okay, so back to the assignment page, then your discussion post as well. Okay, so now let's go back to the module and let's get into the lesson content. So the lesson content basically talks about the things that are taking place. Starts out with your assignments, classification, myth versus fact, then some thoughts from a prison lieutenant. So, as you should know, prisons, which is what today's topic about, not jails. And we've already discussed the fact that prison is when a person is sentenced to a year and above, and it's a longer commitment there. And individuals who go to prison based upon the offenses, based upon all the circumstances, will determine how they're classed. And so offenders, it says, first they're oriented at the prison, they're fingerprinted, mugshot, and all that kind of stuff. Then they're assigned to an institution based on whether or not the offense is a maximum or a very serious offense, or if it's a offense that is minimal, and they're going to serve the time out in that. And individual case plans decide where that individual goes, and also their needs. For example, if the person has a alcohol drug issue and education or job skill training, that's not going to be in the max as much, but it's going to be more in the minimum security prisons and classified. But it's going to be based upon what you need, what your individual needs are and the offense. Once you're incarcerated, there's going to be a change. You're going to have to adapt to the way of surviving in prison. You're going to have to learn what the code of the inmates is, even though it's not necessarily a requirement, but it is necessary for survival. And there are going to be things that you probably had never been exposed to that you're going to learn, different language, and then you'll be exposed to various factions, even gangs. Even if you've been exposed to them outside of prison, there's a difference because there are all kinds of violent issues that take place in prisons because of the gangs themselves. There's going to be contraband involved there, and all kinds of things that are happening. Weapons, drugs, alcohol, and things of that nature. Two important issues that relate to prison involve sex and violence. I've already kind of talked about the violence a little bit through the gangs, but with the rape issue, there is, because of the fact that people don't have the opportunity for conjugal visits in most instances, there is the chance that an individual could be raped, and a male person raped by another male person, female person by another female person in a female facility, and even some instances, the actual correction officers or guards are guilty of that as well. So there are a lot of these types of things that take place that the inmate is exposed to and have to learn how to adapt to. So it's pretty difficult for the staff because they're overcrowded in the prisons, and the staffs are actually short-staffed, and now they're hiring more professional individuals who you'll discover are high school, not high school, but now attending college, getting associates and even bachelor degrees to get the better paying positions. Relating specifically to women prisons, there is an increase. Most females are involved with a male that ends up resulting in them being incarcerated. And there are issues such as drugs and crimes, and then separation from their children. There's pregnancy. There's all kinds of female issues that are faced by females. Again, the sexual assaults from many of the male and female correction officers. And so because of the violent crimes that take place, and then, like I said, there are nonviolent crimes, but individuals, I can tell you, have found themselves as females in prisons because, as I said earlier, some guy that they're associated with has gotten them to do something, and they got caught and end up going to the penitentiary. But there are problems, high rate of suicide because of separation from their children and their family. And then they talk about the fact that there are motherhood issues, health issues, ongoing, and then, of course, finally dealing with the issue of sexual abuse. So males and females have different types of facilities. I don't know of any facilities, at least I know in Illinois, we don't have male and female housed in the same facility. And if there are some jurisdictions that might have it, I'm sure that they're probably segregated in the facility itself. So now let's take a look at this. I got to run this. Let's see, it'll come back in a minute. Okay, there it goes. Okay, so the question is, do inmates easily adjust to prison life? And then I say no, submit my answer, and the answer is going to come. Depression and difficulties are common, so they don't easily adapt to the prison life as prisonization occurs. Prisons are controlled, inmates closely monitored. The answer is yes and no, and you'll see what they say. Many prisons are controlled by gangs and not correctional staff. And the reason why I say yes is because the correctional staff does have some control, but because of the shortage of correction officers and the increased number of incarcerated individuals, and because of the presence of gangs, then oftentimes the facility is out of control, and the correction officers lose control, and the gangs kind of run it behind the scenes, sometimes out front. Contraband is rare. That's not true. It is actually a regular thing. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, and other unauthorized material are common in almost all prisons. That's one of the issues that is constantly being fought. And you know what? It's not just people visiting. It primarily comes in through, you have some guards, you have correction officers who are trying to do favors and make a little money. Sometimes there are even threats made to the correction officers to provide those things. But I have had cases that I've seen where drugs, alcohol, and other unauthorized material were smuggled into the prison. So it's a common thing. Most inmates are sexually assaulted, particularly when new. I can say yes to that. See what they say. Prison rape is actually less than previously believed. That may be, but it's still one of the issues that many newbies run into constantly. And again, back to the issue of the shortage of correction officers, it's still an ongoing problem. Due to tight controls, assaults are rare. Not true. Inmates commit more than 16,000 assaults against staff. Inmate on inmate is ongoing for the problem itself because of the issues I already mentioned. You have a shortage of the staff, and you have an increased number of inmates. So you have overcrowding, less staff. That equals a situation where assaults are not rare, but the opposite. Prison guards enjoy their power and fight rehabilitation efforts. That's not true because correction officers are now highly educated and trained and more favor rehabilitation and don't really hold animosity. So it's not the punishment aspect, but because of the highly educated correction officers now that are highly trained, rehabilitation is the method to try to help hold down animosity and to help the inmate in the long run. Women are seldom sent to prison. That's not true. So this on an increase. Gender-neutral sentencing reforms have placed more women behind bars, based on what I said earlier. Female inmates form quasi-family units in prison, including same-sex relationships. True. Females tend to mistrust more and avoid forming close relationships with other inmates. However, in order to survive, there are times when individuals do find themselves in situations where they will form a relationship in order to make it through. But the myth says that females form quasi-family units, including same-sex relationships. But I can tell you, I think that sometimes you have to make sure that you understand what that means, is because of the fact that my experience with dealing with individuals in prisons is the opposite of that. The majority of female inmates are young and unattached. Not true. Approximately 60%, that's over half of all female inmates in state and federal prisons, are mothers. So they are very attached. They have their children, and that leads to the problems I talked about suicide, the high rate of suicide in prisons, and it does create depression and other issues of that nature for the female inmate. And that's the end of that exercise. Okay. So now, before we watch the video, I want to come back and go to Module 7, since we don't have a lecture next week. And I want to talk about not the written assignment, not a discussion, but the interview project. Okay? So now it's time for you to submit the interview in week 7 and the required questions as well as discretionary questions. Now, the one thing I want to tell you is that this is the exception to the rule for APA. You're going to have a cover sheet. APA formatting is essential. However, only in-text citations. There is no need for a reference page. This is the only exception. Don't present this information in question and answer. Instead, use complete sentences, coordinate your thoughts. And this is what's included in the rubric. And this is due a week from Sunday, not this Sunday. And it tells you, coordinate your thoughts. It tells you everything in here. Then I have in capital letters, references are not necessary for this assignment. So you're aware of that. Now, again, just in case you don't know where the questions are, here's where you'll find them. You go to the open house, you'll hear it, but I'm going to show you where they are. You go back to Module 1, go under the lesson content, and you go down all the way to the bottom where we start to talk about interview. Here are the required questions. There are 5 required questions, and the interview should include a minimum of 3 questions of your choice, so a minimum of 8. So the bottom line is that make sure you do this in narrative form. So there they are. Here are the questions. Here are the required interview questions for your information. Again, it's found in week 1 under the Lessons tab, Interview Overview. Okay? So now that's it for that. I wanted to make sure that you got that. So if you listen to this lecture again, you won't have a problem finding that information. So let's go back and let's conclude today by going over the listening to this recording, this video, and I'm going to take off.
Corrections Lieutenant at Minnesota Correctional Facility in St. Cloud, which is our intake facility for the whole department of Minnesota. I've been in the department for 20 years. I started as a corrections officer, going to corrections sergeant, and now my current position, corrections lieutenant. I'm also the team leader for our special operations response team, and I also do a lot of training and that.
So what do you need to be a corrections officer? What are the minimum requirements?
GED or high school diploma. You apply online, and then they set up the testing. The test consists
so you do not need a 2-year degree or any experience. High school is sufficient.
Yes.
Okay.
And then if you get hired, you'll have to pass a physical exam, there'll be drug testing, TB testing, and then once you pass all that, you do 6 weeks of an academy, and then first year appointment is probation.
Okay, so lots of training that goes along, on-the-job training that goes along with this.
Yeah, vast majority of that first 6 weeks is on the job, and then you start a lot of job shadowing stuff.
Okay, so if I were hired as a correctional officer, is there a typical day, or what would my day look like?
Well, you drive to work, pick up your radio, your keys, you put on everybody has to wear a utility belt, minimum cuffs, chemical irritants, you report to your post. You could work anywhere from the living unit to your control center to supervising the record crew. There's a lot of different post officers. The average day is a lot of observation and can seem to be boring at times, but that can escalate to very dangerous and wild times in a split second. A lot of our situations are just dealing with officer presence, communication skills, verbal directives. We can mainly get our compliance that way. If that doesn't work, go up to the force continuum all the way up to hands-on, chemical irritants, intermediate weapons, whatever it might be. It's not uncommon. We have fights quite regularly. Deal with a lot of incompatibility issues and people getting restored. Just ongoing.
Okay, so you mentioned that you were the intake facility. So do you classify inmates? Can you talk about that and what level of security is this institution?
The security levels for the institutions go 1 through 5, with 1 being the minimum, 5 being max. They determine the facility's security levels with operational needs and structural needs. For instance, the level 4 has requirements for mandatory armed outside patrol, or you might have secure perimeter mandates for armed officers on the wall, things like that. So once you designate facilities, when they come to our facility, they're seen right in the intake area, their fingerprint, they're asked a series of questions and take pictures of their tattoos, you see health service right away, and then they're brought into the intake unit, which is the area I supervise. They spend about 30 days in there, they go through orientation. First full day they're there, and then they're seen by health service, psychology, alcohol, drug assessment, education testing. A lot of things going on to help their classification. Within the 14 days, first 14 days, the case manager should enter data relevant to their classification score. And their classification score is a number, and it's the factors of your current criminal conviction. What that is, your past criminal history in the last 10 years, your behavior in prison in the last 5 years, and then there are blocks in the classification. For instance, if you have life without parole, you cannot go below level 5 without life. So it doesn't matter any of the other factors. So when the 28 to 45 days of classification officer and PRT team meet, they give you a score, and that'll determine your classification. At that point, we'll decide by classification, treatment needs, and then other factors of what facility you need to move to. And then we'll transfer from there. And it's not uncommon for us to get 40 offenders in, and they get 40 out, so it'll be very busy.
So the intake part doesn't happen in a day or two. It actually takes a few weeks.
Yeah, when they come into EOs, they probably spend approximately the first 30 days in the intake unit, then they move to the next unit. Sometimes they can transfer right from that house. Probably in about 3 weeks, they're done with most of their intake needs, all their assessments and testing and stuff like that.
You talked about a lot of things that a correctional officer might do. And in our text, we've talked a lot about professionalism and issues related to just being healthy as someone who works in this field. What contributes to correctional officer professionalism?
Well, you're supposed to treat everybody with respect, be courteous, and you give respect and give respect. that seem to be successful in this career have the ability to deal with the stress that we have in this type of environment. They have a way to deal with it away from work also. They tend to take the high road in some situations.
Do you have advice for students today who are interested in going into this field?
Yeah, most people that are good corrections officers are good observers, they're good communicators, they have good de-escalation skills. These people are incarcerated, but they are human beings and we treat them such. As long as that's what they command at the time, if they escalate beyond that, that's another situation. Those are the people that are most successful. And like I said, there are a lot of rewards as far as dealing with people. Sometimes you get into different situations. But keep in mind, we go from, it can be very boring and get complacent to very exciting split second. So you see a lot of different things are off here. Really, even though it seems dull or nervous, a dull moment or something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that's one of the things that you want to keep in mind as you continue to see, what is going on here. And so you find yourself in a situation where there are individuals and the educational requirements, all of that. So anyway, I've given you all the information that I need to give you today. I hope that you will take the time, if you have any questions, to reach out to me. You know the rules there. So I'm going to say good night at this time.